Hi, Maria. Hi, Michelle. I hope you are getting settled in and getting yourself a beverage to enjoy as we work this evening together on an art postcard for the holiday that you can either enjoy by framing it for yourself, or you can send it as a gift to a loved one. So, just a little bit about me. I'm Lynnie Marie, and I have an art background. I studied graphic design and illustration and worked in the field for several years before I settled down and had a family, and just got very busy and didn't make a whole lot of time for my creative self during those years. So it was quite a while that I had not really practiced my art. I pursued a degree in special education, and I've been teaching as a special ed teacher at high school here locally in Ohio, up on Lake Erie. And I've been doing that for about 20 years. So right around COVID, we all had to go remote, and I decided that I was going to get back into my art. And I dusted off my pastels and I created a little pastel camp in my kitchen. And I played and got messy and reignited my art practice, and I have not looked back. I'm just finding that it brought me so much joy and peace and relaxation to just have that time, that moment where you slip into that very special world of creativity. And it really doesn't take very long. And I think that's what you're going to discover tonight. To create something that is pleasing and satisfying, it really doesn't require a lot of supplies or a lot of time. So that's just a little backstory for you. And I'm going to go ahead and get started. We're going to create on this approximately 4x6 piece of watercolor paper a little frame, and I'm not going to get too worried about it being perfect. I'm just going to tick off about quarter to an eighth of an inch and just make a little frame. And I'll go down here, do the same thing, just tick off the corners. And gonna just connect them. I'm not even using a ruler, I'm just eyeballing it. We're here to relax this evening and spend time with our art supplies and inspire one another to set our creative spirit free. So there's no tension, just chillax and enjoy. Okay, so very, very simple. I'll bring it up a little closer to the camera so you can see. Just a nice, simple little border. And then what I will do is I will tape this off, and that way, when I paint, it will create a nice little white frame. Sometimes you may prefer not to have a frame, and that's perfectly fine. You might want to go all the way to the edges. That works. And this is washi tape. It comes in all these pretty little patterns, and it comes off easily without tearing your paper, which is definitely a plus. So I'm just setting this little workspace up, getting this position, just eyeballing it. There we go. And one more side. I hope that you are enjoying your holiday season. I know it's getting closer. So what we create tonight, you can use as a gift. For someone special. Okay, so we're ready to roll. The first, I'm a one-woman show here, so I gotta make sure I'm letting people into the room as we go along. And I see we have Lonnie Lou, Maria, and Michelle. So nice to have you. Okay, so I'm going to begin with some watercolor, and I'm going to keep the palette very basic but fun. And I'm going to use some purple gouache, which is just watercolor that is less transparent. It's richer pigment, so it's a little more opaque than regular watercolor. It's gouache, if I didn't say that earlier. But you can use regular watercolor. This is just what I happen to have on hand right now. And so I'm going to lay down some purple and some blue. Kind of set a little frosty, chilly theme. And like this. Okay, so I'm going to begin with the wet on wet, and I'm just going to take a round brush like so, and dip it in some water here. And I'm going to make water clouds, just kind of a cloud of water there, dip back in, and a cloud of water here, and right here. And then I'm going to go into this lovely purple, and with the wet brush, I'm going to come back into that cloud and just sort of let it flow as it so desires. Maybe add a little more water, keeping it very loose and flowy. Okay. So I've got some purple down, and I'm going to come back in and add a little texture with a crumpled napkin or a paper towel. And I'm just going to pick up some of that pigment and randomly kind of smoosh, if you will, all over the paper. So I get a nice mottled kind of effect. And that's the first layer of color. And I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of blue next. I'm going to mix some of this wet on wet. I'm going to dip back into the water, little wet here, and just let the blue mingle with that purple. And already you can see it's starting to take a really kind of frosty, wintry vibe with these cooler colors on our palette. And then I'm going to come back in with the napkin. And I'm going to just pick up here and there randomly. There we go. Now, we're going to keep working with this surface being a bit damp. And that's all right. Sometimes you like to wait and let it dry a minute, but we're good to go. And we're going to start to lay down some little fir trees. And I'm going to do 3 fir trees on top of this lovely background that we've created. And this is just very loose and fresh, not worrying about perfection at all. I'm just working with the point of this tinier brush. It's about it's a 0, little 0 watercolor brush. And I'm laying down the first tree, and I'm going to create another one that's going to be closer for us. So it'll be a little bit bigger. Create some little bit of perspective. And I'll show you how we can do that with the intensity of this purple. And so I'm going to add a smaller one in the distance. Okay. And you see we've got this lovely chili purple fir tree forest. And let me just see how everybody's doing. You want to put in the chat how things are going for you. If you have any questions, have a sip of your beverage, maybe take a look at what you've got so far, and we will continue. And I'm just going to come back in with my paper towel, and I'm going to pick up just a little bit of the pigment off those trees. Just kind of dab. There we go. And now I'm going to go back in and I'm going to dry my brush off. So I'll use my paper towel and I'll rinse and just take off most of the water. And that way, when I dip back into this purple gouache, it will have a more intense value. So I'm going to go from the front. And you can see I'm making just very spontaneous brush strokes from the center and out. And it's fun to let the texture of the brush come through. Okay. And I'm going to go to this one, do the same thing. Add a little bit more pigment. Working with a more dry brush here. And very loose, spontaneous strokes. And then the little tree in the back will get a little bit more definition, but because it's further back, it's not going to be as detailed as the ones in the foreground, because when things are further away, they lose their definition. Okay. So you can see our pine tree magical meadow is really starting to shape up quite nicely. It's fun to play with our art supplies. It's great to spend time creating and relaxing, making some beautiful art. Okay, so I'm going to just go in, maybe add a little more of a treetop here. There we go. Okay, and I'm going to grab my other brush, the one that I did the initial wash with, and I'm going to add a little bit more of the blue. So right now we've only used these two colors, this purple and blue. And I'm going to add a little more to the sky. And then I'm going to let it kind of reflect down here onto the ground and make a little pathway. And then wet my brush a little bit more. And kind of schmooze out again. It's nice to have a little focal point that the eye can travel back into space here. And I'm going to flat a little bit more of this up. And just take it down the pathway a little bit. And I think our blue layer is looking quite nice. So use the blue. I'd like to use a little color theory, but what we've done here is we've used the cooler colors, the violet and the blue, and I'm gonna add a little bit of green, and just for dimension's sake, I'm gonna add it with this teeny brush to this tree here in the foreground. Just give it a little bit more shadow and a little more detail. Just a little complementary color on this purple, just for some depth. There we go. Okay, welcome, welcome. So a little bit of green, and I'm going to leave the tree back here alone because it's that aerial perspective where things start to gray out the further away they get. And so they lose color and detail. Okay. So now I'm going to have some snow. And I'm going to come in with the purple again and load my brush. And then we're going to do this fun little splatter effect. I have a pencil and I'm going to just tap it. And you can see it's starting to snow. I might need to add just a little more water. Don't be afraid to make a mess. That's what is, it's about making messes, letting your inner child run wild, enjoy the process. Don't worry about perfection. Art does not have to be perfect. Okay, so I've got some purple snow. And then I'm going to go back in and do the same with the blue. Tap a little bit down here. Okay. So now we have a nice layer of snowflakes falling. And if you like, you can take some more purple and you can add a little bit more detail to your tree that's in the foreground. So maybe just a little darker. So we kind of go from the lighter to the darker when we're working with the gouache. Layering and letting some of the layers dry and then coming back and working back.
Excuse me, which brush did you do this splatter with?
Oh, you know what? I just took the smaller brush and then I wetted it down and added some of the paint, and then I smacked it with the pencil. and just moved it around. And then I'm going to do the same with this tree over here. Just a little more detail. There we go. Okay, so we've got our little pathway back into the meadow. And I'm going to add just a tiny bit of that green again, just for a little accent. And I'm going to use the smaller color because this is just like shadows and light, and nothing really is ever, really black or white. Everything's reflecting the color that is surrounding in nature. The white, the snow actually picks up and reflects all the colors that are around it. Okay, so I added a little bit of green for the depth. I'm going to go up in here just a little more. Up in there. And then I will come back with this larger brush, and I'm going to create a little vignette frame, kind of like in those old-fashioned pictures where it sort of fades in and out around the frame. So I'm going to come back in with a little deeper purple. Just work it like so. Right into the corners, sort of curving, giving a little bit of space around. So it's gonna make a nice little vignette. And I'm just gonna come back in with my paper towel and kind of dab it. There we go. And that's gonna look lovely once we take that tape off. So I have a nice background and I've got good details going on. I don't want to overwork it. I'm gonna, know when to say when, because you can sometimes overwork a piece. And I'm gonna take my blow dryer just because I want to add a couple little more details, but it needs to be dry. So I'm gonna hit it with the blow dryer, and I'm gonna mute myself so you don't have to hear this. But just for demonstration's sake, you can use a blow dryer. Take it to the salon, give it a little blowout. So just 1 second. All right, so now I've got this nice and dry, and I'm going to go back in and add with one of these Posca paint markers. I'm going to add some snow onto the trees and also add another layer of snowflakes to our purple and blue snowflakes. So I'm just going to come onto the tree and where the snow would be laying on the branches. So just kind of randomly lay some thick fluffs of snow. And you can just use white paint if you don't have this Posca marker. It's fun to experiment and play with what you have. It creates endless possibilities when you just sort of are willing to take a chance with what you got and use it in new and different ways. So we've got some nice layers on our branches. I'm just going to come back in and make some different size flakes to add another level of depth to this magical meadow that we have created. Okay. So I hope you're having a good time and you're enjoying making your art postcard with me. The last step that we can do for this is add a little sparkle. Okay. I am just using a marker that has some metallic, and I'm going to add some little gold stars. Okay. Feel free to add any other kind of element that you think would be a great addition to this piece. And I'm going to go ahead for time's sake because I'd like to do one more. And here's the big reveal with our border. And you can see how nice the vignette is looking. In addition to that white border, it really gives it a nice finish. But it's pretty cool when you just have a limited palette. It gives a very stunning effect, I think. Less is sometimes more. So there's a few spaces here where the watercolor worked its way out. So I can just, if I'm really set on having this, perfectly white all around, and just go back in with some white paint and touch it up. Probably will work better after it's really dry. Like this is still too wet, so I can come back and do that later. But yeah, no worries. It's all very doable. Okay. And then the last part of your postcard is to add a message, and you can do that on the front, or if you're sending it in the mail, you can do it on the back. I'm going to go ahead and put this on the front, and I'm going to choose a line from Silent Night. You can initially, this is a nice pen because it's permanent and it's archival. It's a micron pen and they come in different nibs. So it's really nice to work with because it does leave it permanent. But I'm going to just sort of pencil it in. And I love to see handwriting. I think it makes it more personal. All is calm. All is bright. Okay. So now I have it placed and I'm going to go over it with this micron pen. Okay, so we have a nice little message, and you can go back and you can thicken up your lettering. And you may want to sign it. So maybe put your initials in the lower corner. So when you give it as a gift, it's personalized. And if you don't want to give it, maybe you want to keep enjoying it yourself, you can put it in a frame like this and enjoy it throughout the holidays. Okay. Any questions at this point? Go ahead and put them in the chat. I'll give you a second. Maybe take a little breather, get yourself something to drink. Okay. Close up of the treetop. Sure. You want to see how the gold looks, maybe? My camera really doesn't pick up the metallic, but it is a sparkly pen. Is that helpful? Sure. Now you can continue to work on your pine trees, and I am going to start a little snowman, and with a very fun color combo. Again, not your typical what you would expect to see, which makes it more playful. So again, I'm going to just map out my border. And the art postcard size is so nice. It's just right for experimentation and learning and practicing. You can really play with all your supplies on this size format and not worry about wasting paper or making mistakes because it's just the right size. I'm going to lay down some washi tape. Okay. Okay. So same kind of premise as we started with our fir trees. This time I'm going to focus on like coral and pink colors. I'm going to lay these down on my plate. And kind of mix some reds, pinks, and oranges to get like a corally colored snowman. Okay, I'm getting these all laid out. And for the sake of time, I'm gonna start this and then we'll see how far we get. And then I can show you the final piece. But again, I'm gonna go in with some water clouds. And I'm using this pinky corally color. And just a little bit of red for some depth. And just kind of letting it bleed into the wet on wet. Kind of like a swirl of frosty air. And then I'm going to rinse it out. Again, I'm just using the same two brushes. I'm going to come back in and pull up some of that pigment, which is creating a nice little textury background. Okay. And then with my smaller brush, I'm going to create 3 snowballs for our snowman. Now you can pencil this in if you like, if you prefer to have a little plan. You can slightly sketch some imperfect circles. I wouldn't worry about making them super duper round. Looks better when it's a little less perfect. Okay. And I'm going to sketch in a little knit cap. with a nice little fluffy yarn ball at the top. And I'll pencil in some sweet little eyes made out of coal and carrot nose and some little stones for the smile and the buttons. Now I'm going to come in and have some branches for the arms. And let's add a little scarf. And just let it fall down the side. And we'll give it some fringe. So we've got everything placed right now. And we'll go back in and add some value to these snowballs. And we're working lighter to darker. So we're laying down our first value. And so that the snowballs have a rounded effect, I'm kind of making these strokes come inward and then letting them kind of fade, leaving some space for that nice undercolor wash that we started out with. Okay. So let's go ahead and add some pigment for our hat. And I'm going to use some orange now. This is a fun little orange cap. So I'm going to come back in and add a little bit of the orange and the red. Again, another palette that's pretty simple. We just keep mixing and, kind of like enjoying a little color theory. When you add a little bit of the red to the orange, you get orange red. And it's working nicely together, making some harmony with our colors. And then we're going to bring our scarf down. Just let it flow right down the side of the snowman. And then I'll come back and add a little bit of the red for some texture around the band of the hat. And maybe a little shadow. And a little bit more of the texture on the little fluffy ball at the end of the hat. Okay. I'm just going to add a little bit more red, and I'll come back with my brush. And this way we're getting the feeling that it's round. And this would be the side that's not facing the sun, so it's more shadow. Okay. Now, we're going to create our snow. I'm going to come in with my brush, and I'm going to keep it nice and wet. And I think can probably tap it. Yep. Because it's nice and wet. I was able to not have to use my pencil because there's enough water on there. And it's falling quite nicely. We got our nice layer of snowflakes now. Okay. And I'm going to come down and I'm going to give a little bit of ground and shadow for our snowman to rest on. And I'll pull up a little bit of pigment. And maybe just add a touch of orange over here. You can blot that up a little. Okay. So I'm going to have to mute and blow dry so that I can show you how to add the last of the details, and then we'll be done. Okay, good. So we had a little bit of this blowout, no worries, because we just have water and blot it up, and we got a nice little added bit of background color. And I'm going to come in with that micron pen, and I'm going to add the details. I'm going to leave just a tiny bit of reflection. these buttons on here. And now I'll give the branches some detail. Okay, and I've got to give him a little carrot nose. Come back in with that small brush. And I'm going to add some berries on these branches. So if you enjoyed this evening, I would like to invite you to come be creative with me on a regular basis in my Be Creative membership. I will give you the link, and if you're interested, I would love to have you as a member. We will meet twice a month live and do tutorials like this one together, as well as there will be a new lesson dropped each month that you can watch at your leisure and do in your own time. And then we meet twice a month for Q&A, cozy art chats, and more inspiration and community, which is the joy of being an artist, to be able to share that creativity and grow in your skills and share your beautiful art. Okay.